When you're going to drop a Love Supreme into the conversation, that's a very high watermark. I remember in great detail where I was standing in the room the first time I listened to that record. Like I have an image of like where the stereo is, where the couch is. What you're describing is the work of an audio engineer, which is to understand what's encoded, what's in there, what they're driving at, what the emotions are, and to paint them with more vibrancy and to bring them out and to enhance them, support them, enable, empower, all that. I'm going one step back from that and saying, how often are you re-upping your Love Supreme level connections to records?
And action. Again, sliding into home with another technical feat. Pulled out by Dylan Seals.
On a positive note, I just got a notification that told me that Manuela's bar is now open.
Oh boy.
Which is kind of big news for the quick stop-in.
Sure is. Little sherry.
I wonder if you need a reservation to do this. Sorry, I'm getting my level proper here.
It sounds good. I like when the headphones step it up a little.
Yeah, okay, good.
Yeah.
Housekeeping.
Thank you.
Our producer, Dylan Seals, in Tennessee, is looking for an audio editor to join his team. He's doing a bunch of different work, different podcasts, all sorts of genres, and needs good people. So if you know someone who's interested in post-work or editing audio or anything like that, and they're willing to work remote and want to work with Dylan Seals, then what should we do? How should we do this, Michael? DM us and we'll connect?
DM him at Dylan Seals.
At Dylan Seals. There you go.
Yeah.
Done.
A post is going to be posted tomorrow at 11 a.m. PST. So share that if you can.
Yeah, that would be great.
Let's find him someone.
Yeah, find him someone good from the community, someone he can depend on and someone who he can level up.
Yeah.
Win-win. Yeah.
Any other housekeeping? I feel like we should have housekeeping. I really like the idea of housekeeping.
Right.
Is there anything else to say?
We're not. Our house is
Michael?
not well kept.
Yeah.
It's a small
fill
house.
out the form if you haven't.
Yeah.
And
like and subscribe.
Make your bed, as Jordan Peterson would say.
Every morning.
Every morning.
It's my first task. So take it from me. It helps start the day.
My first task is waking up and then take it from there.
It's not a task. That's biological.
It's a chore.
Oh, I thought you meant the app, Waking Up.
Oh, that's
Harris.
third in line. Making
That's
the
biological.
bed, decent espresso machine, making an espresso. Third is waking up. Fourth is Huberman knowledge to walk outside in the morning sunlight before 9 or 10 a.m. And then after that, it's a fucking free-for-all.
Then John just starts chugging Jaeger.
Yeah.
He's like, get the meditation done.
I don't think I've had Jaeger in 21 years.
Yeah.
That would make it have been 14 when I had Jaeger.
Sounds about right.
Yes, that's about right.
It's interesting. Jaeger's a drink that probably didn't see any dip in sales during the
If anything.
the pandemic. It's like the Venn
surge.
intersection between Jaeger drinkers and people with COVID awareness. Probably not that great. Okay, that's all right. Back up is rolling. Let's drop back in.
We're cool.
We
It
haven't
might be
done
the
this.
same people that yell woo outside for every 6 minutes.
Every time they walk by Woo, it's those people.
Just a woo.
I still hear it. Like,
out here.
I'm watching. Oh,
They
really?
came down here.
I'm watching
Every night.
TV or something, and I still hear it from across the loft, from the window. Someone, woo! It's just like, get out of here. Like, I know you saw the
What if
sign.
it's the same person?
Every time. Haven't done this in a while, but we drank a 1996 JB Becker Old Riesling tonight, which was kind of exceptional. Speaking of Jaeger, it blows the fuck out of Jaeger. Thanks, Von Boden Importers and
Indeed.
and JB Becker for making such delicious wine that ages quite well and interestingly, and it's kind of lovely tonight.
Yeah, it was really fun, interesting.
Yeah.
Time travel.
Study your history.
I saw that.
Yeah, we take history lessons by the glass. That's kind of that's the
our
extent
mode
of our historical awareness.
Yeah.
It's a good one.
I liked last week. I think Michael had been on the theme for quite a bit, but kind of got a little bit more focused. The idea of how do you understand kind of where you're at and what you're doing without understanding the history, your elders in a sense, and where things originated from. And I wasn't really well studied in history. Those classes I left and went to the practice room to become a better saxophone player. Saxophonist, yes. And now I wish that I was more well versed in history. So if I can do it by the vine.
But they still have history books. You can still get them. Yeah, still a thing.
It's still a thing, but there's so
much.
There's so much to digest. I go through. We all do this, but we go through phases of digestion of information, and I'm just exhausted by information at the moment. There's so much. I'm in a really specific mode that I will leave off the podcast of what I'm listening to at the moment. Because it's not really relevant for the conversation, but
all Phil Collins people. It's just Phil Collins wall to wall.
That's really funny. I'm working on a mix, and the obvious encoded reference point of the artist is Phil Collins, and this is actually kind of cool. Where one of those stories where you take something so far from the rough mix, and then the only note coming back from the whole team is like, "Can you turn the snare down in the verse a little bit?" It's like it's super Phil Collins. All the harmonies and the ad libs. There's so many vocals that come in throughout the arrangement of this record are all mono and up the middle, doing nothing for the record except for this dude can sing really well. And I put an H3000 on every background vocal, and then it was just like, this sounds like that, but now. And it's like all those things I always talk about, where how do you make a reference point be nostalgic without being dated? Mm-hmm. And every background vocal has a different version of an H3000 preset that sets it apart and wide and has this history and this encoded nostalgia. And they got it. They fucking got it. And I just did it on instinct. I didn't second guess myself. I did think once, they're either going to love this or hate this. They're going to be like, he understood what we were going for, or why'd he do that? Put it back up the middle. And they got it. And it's just one of those like kind of win moments for an engineer. It's like
that's a way of calling back to previous era and drawing on what's familiar to people and setting this in a context, connecting it to history.
Well, I heard the kind of the emotive what's the word, like tribal kind of yell, musical like sting kind of thing, like that was happening, and it was just mono and dry. Like he was trying to do this thing, clearly, and then like the engineer, whoever the producer, didn't want to take the time, or maybe did it in another version and it didn't land right, or whatever it was. It was clear to me, and that's the practice and that's the understanding of history that we're getting at last week. And I implemented it, and the conversation really. I had re-listened to our conversation, which I don't do often. And then I implemented that instinctually without thinking about it. Then when it was done, I thought about it. I was like, that's really interesting. So anyway, I wanted to full circle back and how to implement what we're talking about into my own work.
Yes. What determines when you listen back and when you don't?
Good question. I've only listened to 3 back of 34 released. The feeling I got from the night of, I thought it was our best episode last week. And then listened back, and sure enough, it's been my favorite. It's the most competitive in a sense, where it feels the most me and us, where we're being very opinionated on things that matter deeply to us, and working our way through concepts that will either inform others or ourselves in our future development as engineers and humans and producers and designers and creatives in general. So I wanted to listen back and see if I felt right about what I felt. And I think we were kind of all in our own lane there, bringing bits to the table that could lift each other up and push forward. And I just felt it. It was the first time I felt that.
Yeah,
Nice.
I felt a lot of progress coming off of that episode, and the way my thoughts have been progressing since. I'd run some experiments with Trio Mondili, playing a video and seeing what YouTube recommends after. That's a fucking trip right there. Some other Georgian music, and like played some Turkish and some other sort of related, geographically and culturally related types of music, but also played like a kind of spontaneous street performance of Georgian men. And this got, you talk about dangerous. I was like, one of these motherfuckers got in a fight that night. You know what I mean? Like when you hear those girls sort of singing deep, like in their chest, their tone is down in their chest. And then you hear men doing this and getting, and all together.
They don't have an H2000, do they?
No,
They
but they're
want
in
it
a
though.
circle, in a like a town square with beautiful, beautiful buildings
Its own
around.
chorus
and
effect is. Yeah.
It's like very, very intense.
I find something really interesting about Iranian music culture, and when you're in Iran, I've never been. I'd like to go, but you're not allowed to publicly seem like you're having a good time. It's kind of the way that it's put. Like you're not allowed to sing in public. You couldn't be the Georgian women and walk around the neighborhood. But there are these caves, these tunnels, these bridges that at night, or during the day, but a lot of times at night, men gather in the old men and they just they improv. Everyone sings together, and I've seen some videos of this too, where there's camaraderie and this. It's all free form, and it's one of the. I mean, every time I see a video of it, I cry because it's completely unallowed culturally speaking, and I wonder if that would come up in this search one day of this, because it's probably not documented quite well either.
Unallowed at a government level,
Yes.
at a religious level.
Both. Yeah, you cannot sing in public. You're not even really allowed to smile. You can get in trouble for smile. You can't seem to be having a good time.
Right.
That's, I think, the language that I've heard a few times. But there are places where you're allowed to go and do this, in temples and caves and tunnels, and where you can go cathartically, sing openly with
Caves and tunnels.
yeah,
Jesus Christ.
hundreds of. But if you hear the parts unknown. Anthony Bourdain
Tehran
in the
episode.
Toronto episode showcases this, and then I went on a little bit of a hunt and trying to find some more YouTube videos on this, like a couple of years ago. But that they depict it quite well and talk about it in that show, in that episode in season 6, I believe.
Like speakeasies for human emotion. Right. Where prohibited emotions, like get together and share a smile.
Could you imagine that though? Can you imagine going downstairs after this, and if we wanted to, as a band, the four of us, go outside and sing a barbershop quartet rendition of a Cole Porter song, we would not be allowed to. It's fucking wild.
I thought about this week, and I'm going to scare dangerously close to things we don't talk about. But there was an outpouring of posts on Instagram, and one of the posts made reference to this awful country that we live in. And it's like, I don't know, I think it would take about a nanosecond for me to find you 100 more awful countries to live in. And, not being allowed to sing or smile, that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, it's big.
I'm conscious that it's obviously very complex there and here.
Yeah.
Yes.
But, there's a lot to be grateful for on a given Tuesday.
Yeah.
And I'm aware, of my luck in life. But, this awful country, it's like we've got plenty of problems, but I don't think it's an awful country.
Yeah, not to go too far from that, because I think that's enough to say on that topic. But thinking back to Spider and finding these videos and seeing what comes next on YouTube, when we were listening to them, this is kind of in the back of my mind. how smiley and fun and all the time that they're having there, and how that's not allowed in places.
Yeah.
And it seems so fundamental. We were talking about it right before dinner when I was plating some food. You were like, why is this is what music is supposed to do, right? This is such a clear way of communication, emotive communication, music, the form. And they're doing it so well, Trio Mandali, and people can't do it in other places.
They're restricted from doing it. One of the rabbit holes I went down, I shared with Rory and our good friend Dexter from the band Houses, who we worked with and who just dropped a record. Shout out. Congratulations, Dexter. And
Congratulations,
John,
Dexter.
and everyone who worked on it, including me. I guess there's 4 or 5 of my joints on
Yeah.
But this... So YouTube was auto-playing a lot of related traditional folk music, and suddenly it auto-played Mazzy Star live in 1994 singing Fade Into You. And live, right? Not a denatured scenario, live on stage. And she, I don't know her name from Mazzy Star, very sort of, she's kind of a captivating human. Anyway, she's singing Fade Into You, and it's a very disaffected, I mean, the vibe is very, I mean, I call it self-indulgent. It's like very in one's own head, sort of existing in one's own brain as an adolescent, sort of trying to deal with dysfunctional interpersonal dynamics and emotional enmeshment and all kinds of mental ill health, but beautiful at the same time, right? And I was struck by the contrast of like these bright and shiny girl singing as a group and this very lonely American in the early 90s, alienated, isolated. It was a very stark contrast. And then the next video was Nirvana Unplugged doing Something in the Way. Right?
So good.
And so you've got Pat Schmier on stage and the guys. And then the last half of the clip is like them on the soundstage at Sony in New York, waiting for a guitar to be tuned. Just like sitting there, and some of the guys are noodling, and Kurt's being a dick, and he's like, "What are they tuning a harp?" It's just like, come on,
bad joke.
Just like the smugness and the disaffected attitude. The contrast couldn't be greater. Like an isolated American, sort of out of context, spoiled. Taking for granted everything around, depressed. There's so many ways you could describe it from afar. I feel like maybe comfortable speaking this way because I was that kid.
Yeah.
Alone and isolated and alienated and feeling like a fish out of water and all that sort of thing. The contrast was incredible. And then it auto-played from this woman, this young lady called Alice Phoebe Liu, right? Singing like on a sidewalk somewhere. She seemed to be British or Australian. I haven't looked into it. And she sings a really cool version of Walk on the Wild Side by Lou Reed. And she's singing it, and then she gets to the end with, the do, and she's like, I know this is weird, but just try this. I promise it'll feel good. Just sing along with me. And she's like awkward and sort of laughing awkwardly. And then you hear sort of people in the background. It's like, what a novel idea that we should sing together. This is so awkward and strange that but in Trio Mandali, this is life. This is like the stuff of life. And this alienated U.S. teenager or British or Western teenager is just so disconnected from the power and the ease of sort of collective action and collective expression. I don't know, man. YouTube serving it up. You know, like using the algorithm to sort of bring this stuff to me.
Well, it's more than YouTube serving it up. It's YouTube serving it up to a brain that knows the difference.
Of course.
It occurred to me over the last couple of weeks, you know, we started talking a lot about, because of Trio Mondeli, about traditional music and the music that I played as a kid, and just all of the acoustic sessions that we did. I played with a bunch of songwriters, and we did just lots and lots of late night campfire, you know, house party, acoustic guitar sessions, because they were songwriters. They were classic, like, you know, that kind of songwriter. And so we would sing songs that we knew. We would sing songs, everyone would sing parts on songs that someone had written at the table, and we would sing our favorite songs that none of us had written, David Gray or whoever, you know, at the time. So that the power of like 10 voices, drunk or not, singing together a song you know and love and share is very intimate to me. It's in my sense of music. And, you know, it sort of occurred to me during the week that a lot of people don't have that.
Right.
I don't want to call it a foundation, because that's to assume that it's necessary, but they don't have that experience set.
Well, necessary for what?
Well, you know. Yeah. Well,
it's necessary for something.
It's interesting because when, you know, at dinner we've had this situation recently a bunch of times where we've used the word enable in terms of enabling our clients, and Spider has been catching it and saying, no, we're not enabling, because often enabling sort of means you're enabling bad behavior or neuroses or bad habits or whatever. We're empowering. We're hoping to empower people. And it's interesting that when you think of a Trio Mondeli or a music like it, it is we're doing something positive, join us, as opposed to what you've described, this kind of disaffected thing, which is you're doing something negative, here's the soundtrack. You know what I mean? It's like you're isolating yourself. You know what I mean? It's like...
I mean, I can see how that draws a net of connection around the world to people who are feeling that way in that moment or whatever.
It's what connected me to my friends.
It's identifying with that sort of archetype, and this is who I am, and I felt sad. I've never seen the contrast culturally from like the alternative music movement that I felt very much a part of when I was young, that Michael and I explored a great deal when rebranding PMC last year. It made me feel sad, right? It was like, wow, what a great lack of perspective we all had. You know, how disconnected we were from how, like, almost half of the human beings born around the time of 1800 died before the time they were 5 years old. And today, that number is like below 4%.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the world has changed and improved in so many ways. Talk about not understanding the history or the through lines or what the trends look like. You can just go to humanprogress.org or ourworldindata.org, run by Max Roser out of Oxford. And you can see all these trend lines for infant mortality, and you can see the different continents and regions of the world, and you know where they are in relation to one another, and really get your head around, you know, where we sit in terms of quality of life in many, many dimensions. Death by poisoning. I mean, it's just endless.
Well,
you know,
literacy.
Yeah,
education,
literacy.
Yeah, access to education. Yeah.
I mean, it's endless. Like how much improvement there is and how much better off we are in so many ways. That's not to say that we don't have downward trends. We do, but most of them are on a much broader, longer, general positive trend, you know?
I think of this when we've often, you know, Drake is an artist that I respect, but that sort of numbness in his delivery is very, it just doesn't connect for me. I find it hard to listen to and cold and a little bit sad in the way that you describe.
Yeah, it makes me sad.
And
Drake makes you sad?
Yeah.
Sorry, continue your thought. We'll come back to
there's
this.
some great poetry in what he does.
And some great production, clearly. But in terms of
Drake makes you sad.
human. No, and not the music doesn't make me sad. The totality of it, of his output, makes me feel sad at sort of how flat and inexpressive it is in terms of the range of emotion. But it's connecting to people who feel the same way. And I think what we're touching on tonight is that music as enabling, supporting the feelings of where you're at, or music as a we had a friend during the week in Miami reached out and she was like, hey, I'm doing a dance class, dance workshop with some people, and I need a 45-minute arc of songs that starts at 60 BPM, gets up to 180 and gets back down to 60. And it's like, Placidia and I are just jamming on stuff we have, and it's, there's Paul Simon in there and, a bunch of stuff, but like music that pulls you out of the chair, that pulls you out of yourself, that connects you to other people in another place, as opposed to sort of supports a kind of an isolation, which I guess, in
the wise words of the philosopher known as Drake, I know when that hotline bling, that can only mean one thing. Like, that's not enough for you to get up off your.
It doesn't connect to me. But I mean, again, I'm older,
No, I'm just playing.
Yeah.
It's a medicated frame of mind, and this
doesn't flip the intellectual switch in your brain.
No, it does. It flips an intellectual switch for sure.
Yeah.
That's what I mean by there's poetry there. There are a lot of rappers that sort of have this I couldn't be bothered sort of vibe, right? This sort of SoundCloud kind of era. But, even the Brockhampton show that some of us watched on Moment House was also in stark contrast to the Trio Mondoli thing. It was like, it was really... I'm interested in Brockhampton because of the way they're structured and this sort of collective effort that they're making. That's really important to me, and I have a lot of respect for it. I think their story is fascinating. The music is depressing to me. I can see how people could feel like they relate. I was literally listening to Trio Mondoli and then jumped into that concert, and it was like a complete culture shift. It went from all is well in the fields of Georgia and our friends in our village to everything's wrong with the world, fuck the world and all its inhabitants. It was like
but in a similar communal effort. Because they're all on stage together, interacting with each other, empowering each other there. So there's a parallel there.
But acting like they're not.
Acting like they're not what?
But they were all acting as if the others weren't there. Like
no. At multiple points, Kevin Abstract would
maybe
go
later.
up to another member of the band and like put his head on her shoulder and like rock out with them and have band chemistry. I mean, that happened multiple times.
That's probably later because I didn't make it. I made like 7 or 8 songs. But yeah, the contrast that it's again.
Well, I'm just saying it was there. Like they were band interacted at many moments.
Yeah,
I'm not.
But if anyone
fully defending the culture,
I'm not saying they don't have chemistry and
there's clear chemistry in there.
But the songs. Like I could have picked like any one of those 8 of the first few songs, and if like that was just the clip I watched on YouTube, I would feel more alienated afterwards. Like I'd feel worse after watching it, as opposed to feeling better after watching other kinds of music.
That is something that I want to completely disagree on, because that's your perspective.
That's how I felt.
I was texting Michael most of the show and feeling connected to a group performance in a way we haven't experienced yet through this platform. Was it A game? I'm not sure. It was probably like a solid B+ performance and experience overall, but the feeling of isolation was not one that I shared. So I'd imagine
those are the message. That's the message of the song.
No, it's not, because it's fuck the world, it's all like this, but we're here together doing this together as well. It's not full fuck the world. It's fuck the world, but we got our people, like, where y'all to help us. It's not full fuck the world. It's not full isolation, one person with an acoustic guitar in a black room with a mono spot on them singing about how the world sucks.
It's exclusive. It's like, it's just us. It's us against the world. It's an us against the world thing. Whereas this traditional, in contrast to the traditional music, it's all generations, all people.
But historically, it's always been us against the world. Every empire was us against everyone else. So we're talking about this. We're talking about tribal communities that have existed for generations. What's bigger than a generation? Centuries is the word I was looking for.
That's been the overall reality. Tribal existence.
So why would
that's not encoded in the music. But
it's not encoded in the music. It's way more abstract and obscure than that.
It very much is where I come from. It very much is. I mean, there are thousands, tens of thousands of songs about the struggle against the English.
Sure.
The most famous song from a town near my area is called The Boys of Borneschreude, and it's like a very moving ballad that gets sung late at night about these group of guys.
Yeah, Trio Mondoli aren't doing any ballads.
And their struggle. Well,
that's what I'm saying. I don't know the lyrics.
We don't know what they're singing about.
Yeah, I don't know the lyrics, but the general, again, I'm talking about my feelings. So it's the openness and the acceptance and the comfort, happiness, apparent well-being is on display, is in stark contrast to what Brockhampton was doing. Mm-hmm. That's all. That's what I was noticing.
Michael, they're your people. You're a huge fan, and you're younger. So what? I would love to pull out and generalize it a little bit as I see it, but I want to see what you think specifically of, because I think what we've identified over the last 3 or 4 episodes is that Spider and I came up in a different time of music and have a different experience of it, of what it means, Like I was thinking, I used to gig in the summer for 3 or 4 nights a week playing acoustic music, no PA, acoustic music, 2 hours a night, 4 nights a week, probably 4 months a year for many, many years of my life. So, 8 hours a week for 16 weeks. It's a lot of hours of acoustic interaction with different players, with random people dropping in, because sessions, you never know who's there's a core group of people. It's like that informs my sense of music. And then you guys come from an entirely different world.
Not true, but...
Well, you come from...
That's not true. Come from jazz bands and improv sessions and
not
orchestras and the opposite.
Different as in not Ireland playing Irish folk music. Yeah. Jazz and the technical ability in jazz and the improvisation around that. Yeah. You know what I mean? Michael makes his own records, which I never really did with my bands. All of my record making came for other people after. I never actually got any of my bands across the line to make records, which Michael has made and released records. So your experiences are, your sort of musical grounding is different. And that's I want to explore that.
Yeah, Michael, jump in.
I mean, I hear where both of you are coming from. So to Spider's point, I think there's a tonal quality and maybe some lyrics and I'll say those 2 things for sure, but there might be some other things you're picking up on that might indicate this more or less communal vibe that Brockhampton might have in their music. And at the same time, I wrote down on my notebook, communal, tonal, cultural. So tonally, culturally, very different from Trio Mondoli. Definitely not communal in the sort of ancient sense, but also very communal in what they're trying to do, how they're structured. It's a sort of their attempt maybe to integrate what was good about sort of historical music or ancient music or tribal music, folk music, and modernize that in a way. So it seems like these forces of culture are at play when trying to make something communal in America in 2021. I think there's a lot of imposing functions that might prevent that from happening even. I don't know if that's where you were going, or it seems like you kind of were, but that's sort of what I take away from that. That said, I had a very interesting experience, with during the Brockhampton show. So in the chat, I posted my Instagram handle and was like, I'm looking for designers and something else. I forgot what I wrote. Whatever, DM me on Instagram. So all of a sudden, maybe 5 minutes later, I get added to this DM group of all these Brockhampton fans. And I'm like, I didn't ask for this shit. But I'm like, this is amazing. This is exactly where I get to do my research and understand the young brain, experiencing this concert. Because all of these kids could not have been over 24 years old. Maybe even younger, maybe 20s. So I'm sitting in that chat and I'm just watching the messages go by, and to them these were people, I think most of them didn't know each other, and some of them did, but they're sharing the countdown as it was counting down, and everyone's super psyched, and they're commenting on all these little moments of the group, and when they changed lyrics, or if this is a new song, or whatever it might be. And it felt very communal. It was interesting to be a part of that DM group for the whole show, and then also talking with John about it. And then I even said to him, I was dancing at one point in this apartment right here. So there, all of that to say, there are obviously good qualities to many things that have bad qualities, and I think the qualities you're looking at are the influence of culture on maybe tone and
content,
openness,
and
content, yeah.
Because I with Trio Mondoli, I was like, I wonder what Ellie and Mirabelle think about this. I wonder what my dad thinks. And I sent it to my mom and dad. We played it in your house with that. With Brockhampton, I'm not thinking, let me see what my dad thinks about this. It just seems so, the way that youth culture operates. And I really don't know how to think about this, but it's that sort of culture gap where the music only works in a narrow age group, in significant numbers, whereas traditional music is sort of just everybody.
It's more about Sorry,
everybody in a culture. Trio Mondoli is not speaking to the Brockhampton fans.
Maybe not. Maybe they are. Maybe they're not. If they're exposed, but the if you go to Trio Mondoli's comment section on YouTube in one of the videos, you'll just see blah blah blah. Love this. Love from Egypt. Blah 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 blah. Blah all over the world. You just see it everywhere.
And you go to Brockhampton, there's 100 times more. More comments and views and plays on it. Yeah, maybe 1,000 times more. Yeah, that's why I don't.
The popularity is.
Yeah, I don't know, but it's clearly connecting then, right? So I don't know the relevance of the stark contrast versus they just exist on opposite sides of the world, and certain people like this and 22-year-olds like that, and yeah, they might be 19 or 20 to 24, whatever their group is. Their age group is. I don't know, but it just doesn't. I don't know. I'm not.
It's not multi-generational in the way that traditional music is.
Yes.
Well, yeah.
Yes. That's a hard yes, but I don't understand the need to compare. I guess I'm having a hard time with the latching onto the comparison and the contrast versus that simple fact, which is
Yeah.
cool, but like that's enough.
Well, let's change
that's
the framing
that's
for a second.
interesting. Yeah.
So I don't know much of Brockhampton's music. I've tried a few times and it doesn't connect for me. So I've never gotten very far. And I've tried because Michael likes them and you like them. So
Yeah.
but Spiders,
I bumped the album like 4 or 5 times. I think it's great.
Yeah.
I think it's ADD as fuck and all over the place and references a bunch of different genres, and it speaks to what's going on now in a very in a profound way, but in a very elevated way. It's like the best version of multiple genres of music that have been tried to be created for the last couple of years, and they just did it better than everyone with more energy, with a more unique perspective on the sound of it.
I gotta try
I
again.
can echo that. Ross and I were listening to the whole album. He hadn't heard it. He knew it came out. He's a fan of hip hop and rap, and we're driving and I play the whole record, and we get to the end of it, and I was like, that was a whole album. Like, that wasn't a rap record where you're like, every song is just a rap song, you know, and like, that's all you're getting. It's sort of like, you know, one solid stream of the same thing for 45 minutes with a guest vocal somewhere
Here
in
and
between.
there, yeah.
And then you hear this record, and you're 100% right. It's ADD as fuck, but it had just such momentum and movements. And you get to the end, there's like random like moments of 2 minutes of singing and harmonies like scattered throughout, like all sorts of things.
And it's made by the same people. It's made by a community. It's made by a band. The majority of it is made by the same. It's all the things we talk about. So it's all the same. It's why it's like, it's so far in the contrast from Trio Mondoli to this, but it's so similar in so many ways because it's made by a tight group of people doing what they all do best at the highest level that they know how to do, referencing what they know how to reference.
Yeah.
That's why it's...
Well, what we're not having is a discussion where we grade these things as one being more important or less, or one being better or worse.
Yeah, I just hadn't had the experience, like, because what I notice about Trio Mondoli is my mood under its influence. And to me, it was like, wow, I don't remember music that has uplifted me in this way, that made life feel easier, that made me feel lighter on my feet. And then to drop into a situation where the music did very much the opposite. It was like, wow, I feel like life is harder than it was before I started this.
Yeah, I don't know that that's a universal feeling.
This is where I was going,
yeah.
is the nutrition thing. This is what you brought up a couple of weeks ago, music that's nutritious. And it's like, okay, so music, you know, it's a funny word in that context, but it's music that feeds you. And it's like, well, what's it feeding? You know, and definitely when I look back at some of the records I listened to, they were feeding a sense of being disaffected, feeding a sense of being isolated. And yeah, I used that identity to sort of reinforce my friendships.
Yeah, I listened to The Cure and the Smiths and Morrissey and all that.
But I don't know that was useful, healthy, necessary.
Helpful,
we sort of carved out an identity as outsiders, using this music and this clothing and this way of living, because we didn't feel like our parents. We were trying to claim some ground, and you know, you could say it's because we didn't have a rite of passage thing in our tribe, or you know, maybe I should have gone and.
But you're where you're at now with this perspective, partly because you chose that path at that time.
Yeah,
I do, and I also think I'm you know, many of the things we've explored at this mic, like my sort of resistance to business structures and rules, comes from that period. It's like, that's 15-year-old me. I'm not going to work in the bank. I'm dangerous. I'm
glad
Sonic
you
Youth
didn't.
fan. Well, yeah, sure. But I also, I do, I'm not saying that, you know, I wish I could go back and change the soundtrack to my youth. What I'm asking is the question that in this enabling, empowering thing, there's music, you know, we've described at the table last week how music takes over where words and descriptions and ideas run out, and it evokes feelings. So let's say that the modern, let's distill the experience of a modern 25-year-old in America. It's a very noisy, challenging place. And it seems like the world is on fire between pandemics and global warming and student loans and, you've got a college degree, but the jobs aren't there that you were promised. And, the story is quite scary, depending on what you're reading and who you're listening to. And there's no question that there are soundtracks to that experience. I don't know that Brockhampton is or isn't that soundtrack, right? Because I haven't listened to it enough. But let's say you find records that evoke these feelings. And the question is, it's feeding, it's nutrition. What's it feeding? Is it healthy? Is it useful? Is it...
Yes.
And then, so we'll say, let's imagine that at the other end, there is, I'm going to pick Claire de Lune, a stunning piece of music.
That's
right?
very nutritious.
Now, is Claire de Lune an organic salad when someone, is in the grips of sugar and carb and, whatever, an addiction to bad food, right? Is it so far removed that they just can't get there? Is it so healthy? Of course, we could debate how healthy it is, right? But whatever. I'm using it as a model. Is it so healthy that it's useless to them? It's so removed from their experience that they're numb and they can't access it. So I'm trying to pull out a little bit and say, okay, music as nutrition for the soul. It's like, well, is it feeding healthy stuff in you? Is it feeding connection to the timeless, to the transcendent, to the God, if that's what you believe in?
And sadness and loneliness is part of that.
Yes. Yeah. It's not
part of the scope of all of that.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering, what the negative is from understanding and going deep into your isolated self at a certain age when, as we know biologically that we are kind of supposed to, the norm is to push away from your parents and your family as you go through puberty and the beginning stages and the onset of that, where you're supposed to go on your own journey. And maybe these songs are nutritious, or these groups are nutritious in that sense to pull you out and see things in your own voice as, as becoming an activist, or something that just sets you completely apart from the way you were upbrought. So then you can re-arrive back with perspective on understanding maybe harm it caused and the types of people you met through that, and then kind of have a better grasp of the vast types of humans in the world that you can interact with as you get on in your mid to late 20s and 30s. I don't know. I don't see I see you, Spider, finding something that is an antithesis to things that are unattractive to you in the music industry now, that may not have been when you were the age of maybe a large group of our listenership.
Yeah, I was stupid.
No, you weren't.
I was.
No, you weren't. You have perspective now.
I was ignorant and
I wasn't, and fully, and I still listened to these types of records too, and I understood them for what they were.
Yeah.
So I already had perspective on why I like this, and I had a boundary of how it was going to make me feel and how far I was going to go down that path. And not everyone has that control, obviously. Yeah. But what I'm saying is it's not one size fits all. So I can't see it fully as not nutritious for a certain state of mind at a certain time in one's life. Versus, I completely agree that I think Trio Mondoli is one of the most nutritious bits of music, and that style of music, it can cause no harm. It can only really uplift if you have the emotional capacity to understand what it can offer you. And it's like knowing that your body requires iron and certain conglomerates of amino acids that can only be found in red meat, but you're a vegan, so you're not able to understand like the moral conundrum might also be affecting your chance of living for 40 more years.
Yeah.
It's just more nuanced and complex than the sorry.
I'm not trying to make and I'm not trying to put an objective ring around this thing and say this is what it is and this is what it means to everybody. I mean, in the same way that they're like like a movie like Punch Drunk Love or something would give me the same feeling. I'd be like, I don't really even want to watch this right now. Like it's again, like I've become more
I got one
sensitive
after
to
this,
the way that the things influence me. I pay attention to far more than I ever have.
Yep.
So like the again, being strategic about influences. How does what I do in my quote unquote free time, and the things that I take in, how are they affecting my work and my relationships and my tone and my optimism? And so yeah, it's like, what do I want to be influenced by? That I think it's part of that project is just noticing. And I don't want to ever say that like there aren't people who are gonna feel like, we know that people listening to angry music can very often make them feel better.
Yeah.
Like
Well, it's
speed metal,
cathartic.
thrash metal, it
Yes.
sort of exercises
Yes.
and validates the emotion, which brings it down a notch. Like we
Yes.
look,
So we don't act on it.
I'm hip to all that. It's
I was just thinking about cooking the day that record dropped. I listened to it on loop while making a Persian stew and garma sabzi. And as I was documenting the making of it, it was like in the background.
I heard it, yeah.
You know, so if you go through the Instagram highlights story and you hear like these songs pop on, and like there's this moment where I'm dropping in like the kidney beans and it gets all serious for a second, like the red, and like it's a super slow halftime section. It's like, it's so dramatic. And then you get to another section where like the lime is being squeezed in and it's this bright, fun record. It's like, it's so all over the map to put it only in one place as non-nutritious that it just doesn't equate in my brain as that is.
I wasn't listening to the record.
Yeah,
I was watching the concert, and
of course.
I've never heard the record.
Yeah, they were performing the record, but it was mostly the record.
Yeah.
But I want to actually take a pivot off that. I just wanted to just kind of circle back to like the opposite. I know Michael and I through and his group. And actually one thing on the group that Michael texted me at one point, these young kids didn't recognize when Wu-Tang sample happened. And you texted me that the kids don't know who Wu-Tang is.
Yeah.
Speaking of history, that was hilarious.
Dude,
to me.
the chat on Moment House during the show was wild.
I didn't even click
was
over. I
insane.
couldn't. It
It's
was
like
wild.
couldn't deal
average
with that.
3-word.
Yes. Yeah.
Like I don't even know what
no.
the fuck these kids are saying.
But quick pivot to being influenced by your inputs, and I wanted to actually ask you guys if you've seen something. But I was bored the other night, and I put on newest episode of Bill Maher, and at the end of it, he gets to his bit where he does his little like closeout thing, and one of it was on
New rules or
the new rules thing. One of it was like, can you just give us something to feel good about? Like the Oscars are coming up, and all these movies that have such 6+ nominations are just miserable. They just make me. They make me feel miserable. Like make us feel good. We just went through a pandemic, and everything just feels so isolating. Got Nomadland. It's up for everything. I don't know if you guys watched Nomadland.
No.
I watched it. Not very into it at all. I watched them after this just to see, and I'm feeling really isolated right now. So I'm like, oh, let me lean into it because I know the limits that I know that I won't go as far at this point into that, and I'm gonna I like leaning into certain things. Then I watched, because of our profession, I watched The Sound of Metal, which he also mentioned. Have you seen Sound of Metal with Riz Aslan? Ahmed Riz
I really
Ahmed,
want to though.
Is this the one about the dude?
Yes,
Losing his hearing?
the metal drummer. He loses his hearing.
It looked.
This is my
looked
worst
pretty
nightmare that I've been thinking of since I was 12 years old.
Yeah.
Maybe even longer. It's my only true fear.
Yeah.
And I'm getting chills thinking about it. I mean, I cried the whole movie long.
Yeah.
But I want that influence. I want to know, I want people to know that if you listen to music consistently loud for long periods of time with distortion, like bad monitoring, right? This can happen to you. And that is, honestly, I think it's a PSA. And I'm using this platform that we have as this movie is a bit of a PSA. So fuck Bill Maher for saying this movie is not worth watching because it doesn't make you feel good. All musicians and sound engineers and people that work with sound who are in studios with Asperger's, turning their shit up to 130 SPL for hours at a time.
Impossible.
If you want to care about music for that for a long extended period of time, it's not really possible. And these implants, these cochlear implants that are out there on the market that cost $40,000, like I did my research onto the extent of how legit that they documented this, and people with these implants are like, that's as good as one could have documented the experience. It's radio frequency kind of reconnections of the brain and the nervous system, and you kind of sound like a speak and spell, and it's like the noise it's not pleasing. Like you'd rather be deaf. And the whole point of the movie is understanding that the choice is actually better to become part of a community of deaf people and to interact as if you don't have than to chase getting your hearing back. And that storyline is very deep and worth experiencing and watching. The movie's actually fantastic, and Riz Ahmed is one of the greats of our time right now. And he's anyway, I just didn't know if y'all watched it yet, but it's my truest fear.
I wouldn't have based on the trailer. Honestly, it didn't look good to me. But
There's an incredible.
It is really good.
There's an incredible
good to know.
episode of Fresh Air with Terry Gross where she talks to.
I didn't watch the trailer, by the way. I don't watch trailers, so I'm a trailerless human.
Where she talks to an audiologist who even just leaving the house and the kinds of sounds we're exposed to every day are doing damage.
He's walking through Paris, and it's just the loudest thing you've ever heard, and it's just people on the street.
Yeah.
It makes me want to cry.
The cars, the planes come landing over your head. Like there's...
And the way it chops in and out like radio frequencies, because your brain's trying to connect them and it doesn't really understand it. So it sounds like FM radio.
Oh, with the implant?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, anyway, it's something that needs to be considered. And I feel like we should talk about it just for a minute. We don't have to talk about it much longer, but that it's something to consider. And I equated it back last night with Tyler over dinner, how important good monitoring and PMCs in general for me have been.
Protection.
Yeah, hearing protection, but also if you have less distortion in your monitor path, you'll get, I'll listen for short periods of time at over 100, and my ears don't ring because I bring it down after 5 minutes. Like I'll listen through the song and back down and like kind of playing with level in order to do that. So you get that feeling of being in the room loud and bumping shit, but then you bring it back down. And without distortion, I rarely get ringing in my ear, and I listen loud and I mix loud. I'm averaging 96. Like that's probably pretty high. And I don't have any fatigue most of the time. Like if it's like a rock edgy record and there's a bunch of 3K, like yeah, sure, but I carve that shit out because I hate that.
Yeah.
But, anyway, I think that the monitoring, and I don't know if you guys can speak on this, Spider and Rory, about how much sustained distortion through your ear will affect this.
I would question. There's the discomfort of distortion and how ugly it is, but I would question that it's and you're not saying this, but I would say that good speakers aren't a free pass for turning it up.
Of course not. No, I'm not saying that fully.
And actually, you could be at higher SPLs than you think you are.
Before you jump in, what I actually meant was, let me just kind of try to rephrase it. When you have cleaner audio, you don't actually have to go up as loud as you think you do to engage emotionally. Yeah. That's what I was trying to say. Sorry, just throw that in there before you.
That's important. We should actually find this episode of Fresh Air with Terry Gross with this audiologist. I think it's
I would like
essential
to know.
Listening for audio engineers.
Thanks. I didn't know about this.
Yeah, we should find it. It's from a couple years ago. We'll find it. We'll put it in the show notes.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just think there's something there to be concerned about.
It goes to, there is. I think that a lot of people are turning up to... Why do people shout when they're in relationships and they're having a fight? They want to be heard. They want to connect, right? It's not... And of course, emotions run high. Why do people turn up records? They're looking to connect, and that visceral feeling. They're looking to get excited. They're looking to maybe get people on the same page,
or to make it sound better than it does.
Well, Well, they're looking to access excitement, and the excitement. I went through this with a client during the week. It's like where excitement comes from, and it's like not me. You know, it's not my job. That's not, like if it's not in the arrangement.
Oh,
it's
as a
not in-
mastering engineer?
Yeah. If it's not in the transitions, you know, and level too, you know, it's like this is
It's not in the melody.
50% arrangement. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You know, and but when it comes to turning stuff up loud, a lot of people are looking to feel something, and just a simple example, we were talking with a client during the week about this. This is very hard to explain in words, but I'll give it a shot. There is a thing that happens when you're listening in a room. And so we've talked before, I'm going to get technical for like exactly 1 minute. We've talked before about this thing called the Haas window, Haas. And it is basically the way that, let's say a sound leaves my face. I'm speaking and there's a boundary, there's a wall 6 feet from me. So the sound takes 6 milliseconds to get to the wall and 6 milliseconds back. And so a 12 millisecond round trip. That reflection from the wall behind me arrives at your ears 12 milliseconds later than my direct voice. Now, because it's less than 20 milliseconds, this varies by frequency and varies by person. We're going to say 20 milliseconds. Your brain fuses those two things together as one sound. You cannot separate them. Now, the sound of that wall, the far wall, I'm pointing to the other side of the gift shop here, people, which is 20 feet.
No, way more.
From my
30,
face.
30 to 40.
Okay, so whatever it is.
It's far.
By the time the reflection from that wall comes back to your ear, it's so much later, it's outside that 20 millisecond window. Your brain knows very well that it's not the original sound source. It separates it. It puts it into a different bucket, right? And so, get back to listening in a room and whether or not we should turn up the speakers or not. When you listen in a small room, you know, a typical 14 by 16 with an 8-foot ceiling, like a typical domestic big bedroom or
rehearsal space.
Yeah, rehearsal space or a room at you know, a small production facility, whatever. The sound leaves the speakers. You're 4 feet from the speakers. Let's pick one speaker, the left speaker. You're 4 foot from the speaker. But the wall to your left is 6 feet from you. So the sound goes 4 feet to the wall, 6 feet back to you, 10 milliseconds, and it's within that Haas window, and it integrates with the original sound, coloring the snares, the pianos, the vocals, affecting your EQ decisions. Your brain can't separate it out. But there's another thing that happens, which is what I wanted to get to, is there is a sort of a computational cost in your brain, and I don't have better words for it than this. These reflections that come from the back of the room and from the rest of the room, your brain is constantly working to decipher this stuff. And there's this effect that happens when we're in a position to turn this on and off for people as we build treatment into the rooms and bring gobos in and out. When you turn down the sound of the room coming from the rear, or make it later by positioning someone better, make it outside that 20 millisecond window, all of a sudden there is this, it feels like you were listening to the record and someone was just tapping you on the shoulder, just constantly annoying you. Hey, did you remember to get that thing from the store? Hey, just constantly annoying you. And when that goes away, when you turn that down, when you get those things under control, the sound is less colored, you do less EQ. But the sense of envelopment and attention and connection, relaxation, your shoulders go down, and just the sense that I can concentrate on you. It's like trying to have a conversation when your phone is lighting up with texts. You know, it's like, what? One sec. Sorry, Spider.
It's not even your fault. It's subconscious. You don't even know it.
It's pulling you
It's
in.
neurological. I would think.
Exactly.
Yeah, definitely.
And
it's like your brain stops squinting.
yes, yeah.
This is very interesting.
So
I've talked about this with you, but you've made it a bit more clear with this.
Yeah, I need to.
You've been thinking about
like,
this
what does it
bit.
do to stress, cortisol, and stuff?
Well, we talked about that. So
Self-doubt.
when I work on records, certain pop records, I brought this up to you guys. I'll sweat, and it's you complain how cold it was up here at 67 degrees, and if I'm cranking for too long, I'll sweat. My face will perspire. I'm not drenched like I'm in a river, but there's a cortisol reaction for sure. My heart rate will go up, and it's not a kind of record that needs to do that. It could be a smooth R&B song, but based on intensity of mid range or certain frequency ranges that maybe they're in that kind of Fletcher Munson area where they're already louder in that zone. Then it's just they're hitting my nervous system a bit too much and aggravating me and agitating. You know, I think about this all the time. I think about my cortisol rises in volume all the time. You know, we're laughing, but this is like when I notice it. But I don't have those reflection issues in this space because it's so big. So by the time something, I mean, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't.
No, you don't.
I don't have that.
And that's what the Better Cloud was about, and that switch at the time.
But I still feel it, is what I'm saying. And it's mostly by the density of certain frequency ranges coming right off the speakers because I'm like 2 feet away from my giant, let alone 4.
It's pretty full body.
Yeah.
No, I'm really, I'm glad we went there a bit technically on that, which we don't normally do. But it's nice to understand the way a room reacts. I don't think we think about that as engineers as much as we should. And the importance of picking a room that has, what did you say yesterday, Spider? There's
the three things.
The three things.
When looking for a studio here in LA, what are the 3 things to look for? You're on the ground, on a concrete slab.
Better if possible,
Yeah. High ceilings.
10 foot plus.
Because you don't want to be your head when you're sat. You don't want to when you're sitting. You don't want your head to be halfway between the floor and the ceiling, right? 12-foot ceiling would be nice. You'd be about 1/3 of the way. And then symmetry in the room, left to right,
really helps.
Yeah. But just as the DNA to get started, to spend less on treatment and all this sort of thing.
Yeah. And it's hard. It's hard to find spaces that fit
that
those
are inspiring, that have natural light, and that accommodate all the other household needs. It's
this connection to the music. I mean, we talk about it so much, and we're talking about it in this case as it specifically affects the work we do in acoustics, or the things that sort of we've identified collectively that we need to work. Like if we go in a room and you ask us how your mix is, or your master, or your record, or your song, and we don't have that connection to the system, to the room is tapping us on the shoulder, and the speakers are distorting, and the ports are resonating, and the modes are, doing all the bad stuff, then we just can't give you a decision. We can't connect, and we can't work. Yeah. It's not possible to do that, But yeah, had a really fun experience this week with a client, in a big loft, kind of something like this, but more longer, narrower, and a little more concretey, a little brighter in tone, but put together a basic treatment rig. She's a composer, and had that moment where you get to play some stuff, and we talked about it after, and she was saying, I haven't been moved by music like that in a long time. Played Melody Gardot. Once I Was Loved. Crazy song. I'll put it in the show notes this week. Crazy song. Crazy. And the client is a composer and very versed in serious music, and very capable. So the nuances of the music were not lost on her, and played her a Joe Hamilton track, that one "Think of Me," that starts with a little kind of
that's only an MP3 on Tidal.
Is it?
Yeah, it always goes to normal.
I didn't notice that. I didn't notice that. But anyway,
it's beautiful.
She was very moved by the music, and we were talking in the lot after, and I made this note when I sat in the car, and it was like, and I haven't done the wording of it yet, but it's like, if you work on music, and this is further to our conversation last week, if you work on music and it isn't fucking you up on the regular, what's your excuse? How have you rationalized this loss of something so special?
Ooh. What's your excuse?
What's your excuse? How did you give this up? How did you lose touch with it? If it isn't fucking you up on the regular. Now, okay,
What's on the regular?
Exactly. And this is what we said last week, and talking
enough that you can remember the last time.
Yeah.
Well, in this case, it was tears.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Tears. And when was the last time music made you cry? For me, it was like a week ago.
It just took you over.
And given that we're in COVID, it's like, you know, we haven't been to theaters and we haven't been to galleries and maybe the other spaces. When was the last time something, maybe it was in that car ride, Michael? Was it like, when was the last time a piece of art overwhelmed you?
I took the question to mean something else initially, and I was thinking about yesterday. I've been experimenting with this concept called generative design. It's sort of using algorithms to like create design. So I was building one out, and that fucked me up. It was fun. I just loved doing it. So I like built Dylan's.
Well, it was
logo
surprising. It was
completely algorithmically. Yeah.
Yeah, it fucked you up in a different way because it's something you've never really experienced truly before.
Yeah.
More the power of it or the play of it. Or
like a pleasure from the...
But I think that's equal, right? It's not the same thing you meant, but I think that's an equal. Like it's surprising. It
takes you over, like controls your emotions, like involuntarily.
Gets past your defenses, you know. It doesn't always mean tears. Sometimes it's just, you know, it's a different thing. But just that overwhelm of emotion from a piece of art, a movie, or a...
And that's what I was talking about last week when I brought up the floating points thing. When you get to movement 6,
it's gorgeous.
It's just like you just lose, nothing else matters.
I've listened to it a bunch since. Yeah, it's stunning.
It's fucking stunning.
Yeah.
That's an interesting thing to kind of reflect on, though. Like,
it was. There's an assumption built into this question, and like I say, I haven't. That's what I wrote when I sat in the car after the conversation. There's an assumption that you started there, that you had it, which is what we've been sort of exploring this last few weeks. That initial connection to music was that deep.
That way
so
in.
We've sort of identified this Travis Scott listener as a sort of someone whose connection to music maybe isn't that deep. You know, we're using that as kind of a little archetype. But I'm assuming that you had that. You fell in love with music and you started working on it for a living. And now it's not happening as often as it used to.
I want to talk about this for a second.
It's a hormonal fact. I mean, when you're a teenager, your hormones are, your emotional life is different. It's much more intense.
Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking like one of the first moments that I had that profound connection was A Love Supreme when I was, with John Coltrane. And then I'm thinking back to this mix I did yesterday that is a very, very linear pop song, the thing I was talking about, the H3000 and the Phil Collins thing. And it's like borderline cheesy lyrically, but coming from a man singing the lyric that is really vulnerable and trying to make it as emotional as possible sonically, because the rough was cold and tight. And I was like, how do and I just what I was going for, by the time I was done, I was getting emotional from it. And it's not, look, might as well put on a record from that era to get this feeling. You might as well just put on whatever reference point. Nothing's coming to my head, but you might as well just put on a Love Supreme to feel that again. But I want to constantly attempt to evoke that when possible, right? So the contrast of, here's a pop song written in 2021 that's like, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. I mean, someone might think it's great. I think it has the potential to be great. Like, I think that it can connect. I'd actually like to play it because I'm and the AB from the experience of, like, Alex Goose was over and Mike Miller was over earlier today before Graham showed up. And I was bouncing a quick note with the snare down. And it was like, ooh, like the satisfying switch to, and I'm not going to say what Mike Miller said, but he was like, "Oh, you made it less," and then whatever the word was, we're gonna blip it out intentionally. And I was like, "Yeah, exactly." And it's like I made it less of what it was and more of what it should be. And I almost cried. I'm not crying from the lyric, but I can imagine a 17-year-old crying from it that's going through it, right? So I'm trying to put myself in that perspective of, if I was that age,
the intended audience,
the
mix is.
But I'm feeling it. Like, even thinking about him singing this lyric now to me means something, and I can get kind of teary-eyed over how he must feel by the loss of this woman to another man. That if he only did this thing, like, he could have held on to her, and he made a mistake, and whatever it was, and like, and him opening up about it,
deep regret.
Yeah, it's exactly. But it's not it's not as good as maybe if Prince was doing it, you know, and like that real captivating, you know, tonality and
Well, I mean, when you're going to drop a Love Supreme into the conversation, you know, that's a very high watermark.
Mhm.
You know, I remember in great detail where I was standing in the room the first time I listened to that record. Like I have an image of like where the stereo is, where the couch is, you know, like it was kind of like, what is this doing to my 18-year-old brain who has been listening to whatever, Nirvana today, you know? So that's a very high watermark, but what you're describing is the work of an audio engineer, which is to understand what's encoded, what's in there, what they're driving at, what the emotions are, and to paint them with more vibrancy and to bring them out and to enhance them, support them, enable, empower, you know, all that. I'm going one step back from that and saying, how often are you re-upping your Love Supreme level connections to records?
Right.
But
The source.
Okay, hold on.
Yeah.
Well, let me just try to make this straight, because are you saying that it's nutrition again, where all you need to do is listen to a Love Supreme or the, you know, congruent version of that?
Something, and it doesn't mean,
But do you mean you have to create something at that level to re-up, or to listen to and intake something at that? Are you just
Discover.
going to
discover.
Hauser and Wirth to see something that's profound artistically,
Yeah.
like when we
All
used
of
to be
it.
able to walk
Yeah,
across?
just
Yeah, that's what
seeking
you're
it
saying.
out,
Seeking
seeking
out.
it
See,
out,
that's
yeah.
different, because that's not difficult. Right, so you're prescribing something in a sense
I
that
think
isn't
it
very
is
difficult,
difficult.
but it's not.
I think,
But we all have those records that were our entree into wanting to do this for a living.
do we have an hour to listen to them uninterrupted? A phone-free hour?
What do you mean, an hour to listen?
And I'm just
Whatever it takes.
What I'm asking
I mean, you're in the
is,
car, so put on a Love Supreme. It's 23 minutes long, right? The whole thing. I'm not saying that's the record, but for me, it's 23 minutes.
I think
It's a good perspective break from working for 45 minutes and jump. I mean, I'm saying it's actually not difficult. Like, it's fundamentally not difficult to do that. It might be during the time that we're discussing this in, but it shouldn't be.
Well, I think there's a reason. I would guess that if we could ask this question of our audience, I would guess, let's do it, you know, Michael Morgan poll style.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you work on music and it isn't, you know, I use the phrase "fucking you up" because this is how, you know, because that's what Shirley said, I think, in the lot when we were talking about it. If it isn't moving you, if it isn't humbling you, if it isn't, I mean, where you're sort of, these moments where you are impressed by the power, re-impressed by the power of music. I did some great records in the last week, and like you, it's like, oh, this is a really fun pop song. The chorus really lifts. And I got what it was about, brought it out, you know, hit all the marks. That's not the same as what I'm talking about. I'm talking about source level. The Leak in New York.
Yeah.
These are this wine tonight, or glasses that we've had over the years, that are that Krug that we had. You know what I mean? We were talking about it tonight. Like they're these sort of moments where you get a sense of what's possible. And
Yes, but what I'm trying to tease out, what you're going back on, is in the sentence that you're saying that you wrote down, and even now, you're talking about. It seems like you're talking about two different things. And I'm just trying to bring clarity to it.
okay.
Yeah.
Are you working on things that are fucking you up consistently, or are you ingesting?
taking them
Those
in.
are different things.
Yes.
Because I wouldn't have responded with the story of that I am connecting to this record.
Yeah.
Because I'm not working on something that's fucking me up regularly, but I can find a way for it to let me be fucked up.
It's your job to.
Yes,
Yeah,
of course.
it's
But
your job,
what you're saying, which is not in there, is, are you ingesting this?
Are you seeking out-
seeking out
yeah.
inspiration? But that's not encoded in what you
was
wrote
not.
there.
This is the first
So
draft.
I just wanted to make it
we'll
clear.
We'll write it better. Yeah, I'm looking for...
Because that's a great thought, but that's something different. That's harder. That's harder because depending on your clientele, what you're working on a daily basis, how you're surviving financially, the ratio of that profound thought to what I need to survive is a different story than, well, if I'm working for 8 hours today, I can spend 25 minutes to listen to a Love Supreme. It's different versus what's coming across my desk. Am I inspired by the lot of this?
Yeah,
Well,
that's
are
not what I
people
was
even,
Okay,
asking.
okay,
are
okay.
people
What I was
even
asking.
leaning in for this, or even thinking they have anything, like any control over it? Or are they just doing everything that comes, and then they forget that they can steer their own
yes,
career?
Yes,
there's-
again, two different topics, and I'm
that's-
actually,
yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm just
Yeah.
not sure which one we're talking about.
So I'm gonna ask it better.
Yeah.
and
Because I love both of them, and I just
Yeah.
want to make sure we're on the same page.
I think we've explored, getting better clients, getting those projects before.
Yes.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is
Intention.
there are high watermark experiences, records, shows, paintings, plays, movies,
Food. Yeah.
food.
Yeah.
We've all got different words for it. These moments, like the David White quote, that get past your defenses, where the story. So I don't think we told it on mic. At your birthday party, we had at Alex's place, we all did our COVID tests, and we got together. This was just before we were all vaccinated. We got together, a bunch of us, and we had Alex Goose cooked incredible food,
Bolognese.
and we had
24-hour bolognese.
a frankly absurd roster of wines to drink. Right, it was just
I wouldn't have had it any other way.
it was stunning.
Yeah.
Great company, some old friends, some new friends. Everything about it was just phenomenal.
High point of the last 12
Yeah,
months.
a very healing night, I would say.
Yeah.
But there were wines in there that were, by any metric, award-winning, high-scoring, high-dollar wines. The wine that hit me emotionally that night was a wine that smelled like my dad's fishing bag from when I was a kid. A 1986 Joe Bard.
Yep.
It was a beautiful wine, but it reminded me of my dad in a glass. That's a high watermark experience for me with wine. That is that shows me the power
Yeah.
of where smells and tastes and craft and passion can take you, right? So when someone says, "What do you think of wine?" and I say, wine can fuck you up, and I don't mean the hangover.
Yeah.
Wine can, and it's the same with. I mean, Sydney and I will often do it when we pour a glass of wine, a new glass of French wine particularly, and it's like she'll smell it. It's like, oh, this reminds me of
Yeah.
a place, a village, not necessarily the wine, where the wine came from or whatever.
Yeah.
My point is that that's an example of a high watermark experience. A Love Supreme, a record that you love and I love. I remember walking home from the city library with it. I remember the room I was in college, my third year of college. Everything about it, I remember it. And I remember listening to it with the guys and just genuinely being like, this is
Something else.
really intense. This is intense, and so many more, right? So these moments that show you the power of a piece of art to take you out of take you out of time, take you out of the moment, take you out of the place, to maybe resonate with your feelings, but also elevate you. That's what we were exploring earlier, was this thing of, is it enabling you, or is it bringing you someplace? Is it uplifting you? And that's the question I was asking, is how often are you getting these experiences? Because there are people who don't make records who get that far more often than people who do.
Yeah.
Who, we there's a last point, and then I'll hand over to anyone. There's a very common thread, and I've been more guilty than most, I would say, of shitting on audio files in the engineering world and in the technical world, because they're often so technically lost and susceptible to snake oil and bullshit and $5,000 cables on, but
Dummies.
you cannot question their love for music. Many of them love music more than a lot of people who make records for a living.
Yeah.
And are passionate and are seeking these transcendent high point experiences, peak experiences. Peak in the, that's a word that I'm a little afraid of because it sort of imagines a scale, but just these.
Isn't there?
I suppose,
Some things are more profound and
Yes, yeah.
lasting than others.
Yeah. And that was the question that I was driving at. Our work lives are separate. And I hope that our experience of those moments informs our work life, informs our sense of what's possible, you know.
And something you need to keep re-upping is maybe implied in that.
Yeah.
You know.
Especially as the pandemic kind of comes to a close and we have a bit more capability to have these experiences that will invite you, you know, out of the time that you're in.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm looking forward to that. It's been a long year and a half of trying to seek it out on a computer.
I mean, the LA Chamber Orchestra sounds really good about it.
I've been thinking about the Disney Hall every minute. You know, I just want to get in there.
The last point on that, you made the point. Look, I love Supreme. Doesn't matter. Pick up I would point people at the Pharoah Sanders record first, right?
Yeah.
Which we linked in last week's show notes. We can link it again.
Yeah.
Because it's more digestible, less scary record, right? And you say, listen, this thing is 45 minutes long. Just put it on. And I think the ask is bigger than that because when you ask people to meditate, it's like, just 10 minutes. Just sit down, shut the fuck up. Just 10 minutes. And it's really hard for people in the modern world. So, yes, you know, do you have streaming? Is the record available? Yes. Do you have the bandwidth? Can you leave your phone down for an hour? Can you dim the lights? Can you open yourself to that record? Just, you know, headphones on, whatever it is.
Yeah, can you slow down?
Can you slow down long enough?
Honestly, this thought fucks me up. What you're saying out loud fucks me up.
How?
The fact that,
In what way?
that this is difficult.
For people?
For me.
It's difficult for all of us.
Yeah, well, I was thinking about when I played it for the fourth time. Weird flex, I know. And I put it on the first time on the speakers, on the PMCs, on Tidal versus Tidal on my AirPod Maxes or whatever the walk versions of this was. And I press play on the first. And I was like, I'm only going to listen to the first and the sixth, the intro just to get settled. And then I'm going to jump to the sixth. And then I couldn't stop it.
Yeah.
You know, I think that there's something about things that fuck you up like that you can't control. I mean, everything else has to stop.
They're past your defenses.
So
it's out of your
just
hands.
Press play and see what happens is kind of what I'm getting at because I'm getting teary-eyed thinking about the idea that you can't find 45 minutes to do what got you here to begin with because it's going to inform so many decisions that affect so many other people's lives that you're taking the responsibility of, whether it's touching their music or touching them in a relationship sense as a friend or an intimate partner, where you're now more emotionally available because you've had that experience. Like I can't imagine anybody faulting you for taking that time if it only betters you, whether they know what you did or not. Right? There's so much there that's unsettling to think that we don't have the time for that when it's going to do so much good for your existence.
Yeah, we take time to do squats and whatever workouts we do.
Yeah.
This is working out a different kind of thing.
Yeah, I'm really struck by that truth that you're pointing out. That, I mean, let's talk about meditation in the 10 minutes. I've had a really pretty bummed out last 3 weeks, and I'm having the worst meditations of my life, and I'm still doing them, right? I might make 4 minutes, I might make 6 minutes out of the 10, but I'm letting it go, but I'm walking around the loft. I'm doing something to let it still happen. So you put that record on, do you have to be enamored and deeply in it for all 45 minutes? I'm not sure that's the point.
That's not the point.
It's not the point, right? Just put it on. Do an email if you have to. I mean, I try not to,
Get it out of the way.
But it's like it's the way to build habits is by doing things at any cost. To have full attention in said activity, I'm not sure is the point of it. Sorry if you can't. I'm just a little bit.
The reality is
sad.
that you can't control.
I mean, I'm guilty.
You can't control exactly when things will move you in this way. Because I've been to galleries and seen the paintings that are supposedly the ones that,
of course,
and been kind of like,
But what I'm,
yeah,
you know,
you're
sorry, but
you are half of the equation.
But I'm saying, but I'm saying something more specific. Maybe I haven't said it quite right yet, which is normal for me. But if you keep trying, that's when you build the habit of opening yourself up for those opportunities to occur. It's gonna hit at one point. It's the practice. And thank you. And if you don't give yourself the opportunity because you don't think you have the time for it to land, then it's not going to land.
And my question, I think, is upstream of that is like, I'm wondering if people, have had these experiences at this level, and then if they've lost touch with it, are they aware of the seriousness of that? Are they thinking about
it's a calibration tool.
Yeah, and it's a healing force in your life. It's
back to the nutrition and the connection.
Yeah,
because it's nutrition in experience versus the nutrition in the title or in what it is. It's more the I don't want to say escapism because
or the effect of experiencing it, or
the displacement in time to. I don't know. This is hard. This is a hard one. This is really getting into me too.
The reality is, we talked last week about incentives. You won't get any likes for this. You won't get any shares. You won't get, you know what I mean? The society right now isn't incentivized for you to go and stop and turn off your phone and go deep on a record or a book or an old movie or whatever. It's not. That's not. There isn't a reward for that. The reward is a social
externalized.
Reward. Yeah, a social.
Okay. So there's the system
in the short term. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, even so, there isn't a reward in the sort of structure of the forces at work in the attention economy, maybe the economy at large. But I think we are here advocating for the short and long-term benefits to self and to friends and to family and to well-being in general.
100%.
Yeah. I mean, that's in the last, I would say, last 5 years, I have what I consider moving emotional experiences of art. Prior to that, I spent a bunch of years in a pretty numbed state, clinically depressed and available and unpredictably available to things. And I mean, yesterday I installed some PMCs for a producer in town called Keto, she works with a bunch of our clients, and she makes some pretty great records.
Keto's amazing.
Yeah, we like Keto.
Love Keto.
Cool as hell. And we in our it's the first time we met. I've heard her name a long time. It was the first time we met, and we got to talking about electronic music and like what really appealed to us about electronic music. And she was into the social aspect of it, and I was into the way the music could take me over, especially drum and bass music.
The physicality of it.
The music that makes John sweat, that like we can't have on that long up here. Like that music exercises whatever frustration I have, whatever anger I have. And if I start listening to drum and bass on Spotify or whatever, I don't stop for like 2 hours. It gets loud in the car. This shit, like I just start participating. It takes me over. I have a lot of memories of playing drum and bass back in New York and at being at epic fucking parties, Groove Rider at Limelight, fucking Ronnie Size, like whatever. Ed Rush in Philly, Trace, Diesel Boy, like seriously dirty shit. And I can tap into that, or I can jump to like one of my choir playlists, be at home, smoke a joint,
Mm.
go fucking deep. Have all kinds of like inspiring ideas come from it.
Mm.
Like I can be in tears and like suddenly some thought will come, some dots will be connected, or I just find it like to go deep emotionally is so fruitful. It's not even the sort of relief and relaxation that comes after, after the sort of tumult.
Mm-hmm.
It's also empowering.
Mm-hmm.
Even if it's angry, there's something so appealing about post-apocalyptic drum and bass. It sounds like a wasteland.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow,
It's visceral.
somehow it's like you're in warrior mode or whatever. It's just a mode,
Yeah.
and maybe that goes to the Brockhampton thing a bit for people and what they get out of it. But yeah, it's not just calibrating, like going as deep as you can go so that you have that frame to work with when you're sitting and working with records, to recognize when things are good, when they're not, when they're working, what battles you should fight. I think that's the only way you can know, like what you can fight for,
That's an interesting
when
way to frame it.
when you know that experience is there for the audience and there's something in the way. You have to keep calibrating, I think. I don't think you can just work off of a memory from your teen years for 50 years.
I don't
Do you
think
know what
so
I mean?
either. Yeah.
I think you have to keep re-upping.
I hope that it's necessary. I hope that I want people who don't make records to have this level of art in their lives.
In my fantasies about audio school, it's bringing artists like Trio Mondoli to the room.
Yeah.
To have people witness things like this in person.
And
You know
can
what I mean?
capture it. Yeah.
The Seals have Hell Week.
To have respect.
You would have a Bauhaus of Audio Hell Week, and you just keep exposing them to music until they crumble, until you find the way in. This kid, it's drum and bass. Spider, drum and bass. This kid, take him to the drum and bass room.
Dillinger for this
Can we
one.
bring Michael into the conversation for a second about re-upping? Because Michael has freed himself from the encumbered work world of corporate
The hamster wheel.
America in order to have the the capacity and bandwidth to re-up on influences and I'm curious what you're thinking of when we're talking about this, if you have anything.
I love the thinking of it, and I'm thinking to myself that I should be doing it even more. I do re-up on certain things. My whole thing is kind of exploring creativity. Like it's diving in that area and kind of learning about that. Some psychology aspects. I'm looking at my desk right now, the books I have. Like I kind of dive into reading and knowledge and sort of how people are piecing ideas together. That's my re-upping. But in terms of art and like the emotional impact of it, that part I can say that I definitely am not re-upping as much as it seems as though you are, and as a group, not you, John. And it's kind of inspiring, and then I'm like, all right, that means I can't read that day, or sub it out for something else. But I don't know. It also has me wondering, what is the ratio too? I'm like having doubts on it now because we're talking about it, but at the same time, I'm like, what is enough in this scenario?
I beg to
It's
differ
kind of
with your
open-ended.
circumstance right now, because when I see your Instagram and you're sitting at the beach and you're in nature, you're re-upping,
Yeah, yeah.
right? You're exposing yourself to some of the most beautiful art by sitting, staring at
views. At the
Yeah,
top of
yeah, right?
mountains.
Yeah, I mean, if we'll count that, then yeah, definitely.
I
was thinking about that
That's
earlier.
OG art,
Well,
bro.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, transcendent experiences. Staring at the sky at night with a starry sky in the middle of nowhere. I mean, this is
Yeah,
humbling beyond. Like,
I would
Today,
yeah.
I rode my skateboard down. So I've been riding my skateboard every day, trying to get better at it. I had to buy Vans while I was out here because I forgot my skateboarding shoes. But anyway, I've been practicing, and there's a really awesome boardwalk, literally 30 seconds from where I live, paved, really smooth, so I can ride like all the way to the end of the beach in no time. And so I get like, there's literally the end of I guess it's a peninsula that I'm on, to the end of that, and there's this little area where like the beach ends, and then it's just all ocean in front of you. And they have these concrete, sort of like a barricade for a building, I guess for like flooding they have it. And it's set up with these angled pieces of concrete. I mean, it's just like shaped concrete, but I lay on those, and it's in the angle where the sun hits at like 11 o'clock every day. So I go out there and I read for that hour. And today, like in front of me while I was reading, was like a dad, his son, and his like younger daughter, who was like probably like 3. And she was like experiencing the water, seemingly for the first time, but like probably not the first time, but one of her first times. And I was like just watching like that whole interaction, and like her like kind of slowly stepping into the water and like seeing like rush of water coming at her. And I was just imagining what that experience was like. And just seeing the dad like guide her through it and pick up the sand and all of that. That felt like art today. That was my
It is.
yeah. And then the
Art of
sounds
human
all
development.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted to say is, my question, as I had it in my mind, I was thinking of you when John wasn't getting it, because it's a poorly formed question. It's like, but my question was about these artistic high watermark experiences. But of course, in life, it's conversations, or like the way you guys make yourself available to my kids to play, that full-throated, fully available, phone down, adult conversation over play for 20 minutes, half an hour. Today it was just,
I've been rewriting this. I wrote, how often are you opening yourself up for experiences that move you? So how often are you opening yourself up for experiences to move you or to take you over?
Yeah. Yeah. And so the high watermark art experience, play, dance, movie, music, is just
Nature.
one. It could be a conversation. It could be a sunset or a hike. I've had some really good hikes in the last while. And there, the sort of art experience is a subset of that sort of availability, which is why I was pushing back to you when you said, hey, it's 45 minutes, put the record on. And it's like, you've got to be available to it. You've got to be like, there are 1,000 people walk past that family on the beach today, and one dude noticed, watched that little kid and her giggles and the water.
We don't know that.
Yeah. It wasn't 1,000 people who noticed it. There are not 1,000 conversations happening now about that moment. So whatever
Podcasts all around the world are talking about.
Objection, argumentative.
yeah. But you know what I'm saying is that Michael
I'm
was
getting a little bit
available
further into the practice, though, and you don't become available if you're not practicing becoming available.
Sure.
And he's been practicing. That's why I brought it back to him. And the thing. He's practicing opening up books and to be thrown into a new universe of creativity or psychology or some interest. He might not even been interested in the book, but someone told him to read it, and now he becomes interested in something. You don't know what you're about to become interested in, but we are influenced by all these lanes and people that we listen to.
So we've identified first, our way in was art. Art can move you, take you over, and then we sort of we brought nature into that, right? You can have sort of transcendent experiences of nature, the sunsets, the stars, the views, the vistas. When I see Michael getting excited, one of the things that Michael gets excited about is the discovery of new tools, and in the form of knowledge, right? So suddenly Michael has a new lever that empowers him and can empower other people and can have the kind of positive impact he's looking for. And I can see in Michael that kind of lightning bolt moment, and then all the all the cylinders kind of like firing and like all the stuff clicking into place, and there's something transcendent about that. And I'm wondering if nature and art and knowledge and science, the kind of beauty mathematicians find in mathematics and physics and this sort of thing, cosmology, all of that is like a way of getting at this idea of truth.
I think so.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Sort of universal truths and
That's why
human
I
truth.
rephrased art to experiences, because it's your own unique human experience. Whatever it is that opens you up, it's going to be different for everyone. It could be like the felt on those things behind you. What are they called? I forget.
The gobos.
Gobos, yeah. The felt on that. You could edit that out because now I sound like I don't know anything about audio. I'm discredited.
It's not felt. It's fabric.
It's all right.
Is it? It's not felt.
Nah, it's some sort of fabric, textile.
Real talk. I once
Splitting
made
hairs.
them and I used felt.
We're splitting hairs.
I don't know if
so-
that-
No, that's
did
real.
anything.
Yeah. I can imagine that.
But anyway, like
Good. Yeah.
there's someone who works with materials that
Yes.
like has felt
a clothing
and
designer.
was moved.
Yes, of
Yeah.
course,
Yeah.
of course. Textiles is a huge
Yeah.
place that people super geek out and find inspiration
I've definitely
from.
been moved
Did you
by
guys-
I mean, wearing a
textiles.
mohair sweater versus like a weird cotton, like it's just a different experience. Like, of course, yeah.
Speaking
Sorry,
of which,
that's not very vegan.
I wanna an errata, a correction to something that I said last week. I said that I was never moved by dance, and you're talking about textiles and designers. Did any of you guys watch the documentary on Alexander McQueen?
No, I wanted to. I was told to, and I never did.
That made me cry like
Yeah.
a baby on a plane.
Yeah.
I don't want to say the scene if you haven't seen
No,
it.
I plan on watching it, so don't actually. Yeah,
But
cool.
I would like to correct the record and say that I have been moved to tears by dance, and it's
I think I could do it again.
you think you could?
I think I could play a
Oh,
video of a dancer, and
I-
that'll get you.
I bet.
Yeah.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah, I've seen the
yeah.
imagining the one that you're gonna play, and yeah.
But
Depending on how you emphasize that last sentence, I heard it as it made you cry like a baby on a plane,
Yeah,
like a
yeah.
baby being on a
a
plane.
baby on a plane. Yeah.
And I was like, is that some
Yeah.
metaphor?
Yeah.
That's a real cry.
one of those things where I'm on a long flight, international flight, and I'm not expecting to be moved, and then I'm crying in my seat.
Oh, this happened to me, man. In 1999, just got a record deal. Label sent me to England to do some rights, and on the plane, put on this Autechre CD in my little portable CD player, and the last track on it is just ambient thing. It's just an ambient thing. But it there's so much motion and velocity in it. All I could imagine was like the plane going down and this just being the music of all the chaos around me. I was in tears. Suddenly in this scene of a movie. My first time out of the country, going to Europe, and it was powerful. I just found, all the Autechre tracks have really, really bizarre, random names. They're not very even words, so they're hard, impossible to remember. But I tracked it down only recently on Tidal.
And that song, that piece of music, was it about the harmony and the melody and the rhythm and the dissonance?
It's kind of like the Pachelbel canon of ambient,
yeah. But it was that timing, that collision between where you're at, your record deal, the expectation, the excitement, probably a little bit got up early for the airport.
It was a high point in my life, and this is a very tragic
Yes.
sound.
Yeah.
Is it safe to say that if you become more openly, more emotionally available to let's use Michael's term of experience, a word experience instead of art necessarily, that by default you will translate that into the work that you're doing? Do you think it's a one-to-one?
Geez, I hope so.
No, I think it's personality trait openness. That's what they measure in the Big Five personality test. Openness is
no, yeah.
It would fall under this.
Sure. But will that translate into, let's say I'm talking about my example that I brought up, which was this pop song that is, I think it's good. I think it's solid. Someone else could think it's the best thing that they've ever heard. It's good enough to be that for somebody. And my inkling from being maybe affected unknowingly by Pharoah Sanders and Floating Points, and this has been the record of the week.
You were sensitized.
I'm now trying to instill that inspiration that I've felt onto anything I'm touching, right? And I haven't thought about this. It's not really intentional, but now reflecting on our conversation, I'm imagining that it is by default has to do, I couldn't mix it any other way than I did because of that influence that I've had.
Partly.
I'm wondering if that's like a one-to-one scenario, an equation, that there's no other way to do it besides being informed by the thing that was a watermark experience for you.
I hope so. I mean, there's a balance there between, because I think we've all known people who are incredibly available to the music and where to the point where it becomes dysfunctional. So you think about someone who works. Let's imagine you work in a government department that deals with foster care or home hospice care, something gnarly, and you are an administrative officer working for the government. If you are completely numb to people's pain and suffering and trauma and emotions and fears, you can't do your job. If you are wide open to everyone all day long who's bringing worry, trauma, fear, the stuff of your job,
disabled by openness,
you can't actually complete the work.
Yeah.
You can't do the, you can't make the calls, sign the forms, enter the data, do the work of helping these people. So it's like we want to be, I think there's a middle ground. I've certainly known some people who had a better connection to the music than me, but who couldn't get the record finished, who couldn't come out of it. You know what I mean? They were too lost in it. And maybe those people, maybe when they meet the right partners and the stars align, they make the great records of our time. I don't know.
This is a bit of an issue with psychedelic research because one dose of mushrooms can move you. And again, I'm not an expert in personality tests and how they're measured and what their implications are. But trait openness can be moved on a scale of 1 to 100, like 30 points in a single dose permanently. So if you're high in openness, maybe you don't want another 30 points.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So like there's multiple reasons why people with family histories of schizophrenia are excluded from,
yes,
and not only because of the impact on them, but if later in life they have schizotypal or schizophrenic episode, it can be blamed on the research and that sort of thing. So it's complicated, but more openness doesn't mean better, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, so we would ask the question in general, if we look to our audience or to the creative community, is there a pandemic of openness or numbness right now?
Yeah, right.
Which are we struggling with?
Yeah, distraction or availability.
It's not the former. So I think we've got room to move a few points as a community.
Yeah. I think that's fair.
That's why
to
I'm
say.
bringing it up. Exactly.
Yeah.
I think that's...
And
but I guess on that, I'm not necessarily sure that if that's the case, it's going to land every time, right? So there's a sort of braveness that has to come, or a lack of fear that has to come for it not to work out, because you're putting yourself out there, and a lot of the time, when you put yourself out there as an engineer, as a producer, and as an artist as well, it's just not going to land. and that's okay.
Yeah.
With all of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But at
the
least
it here being openness.
No, any risk taking.
Yeah, any risk taking because you feel more. Maybe you actually objectively feel more open than how you feel the record is being presented at the moment, right? Like it's now your turn on the conveyor belt of the production line of this piece of art, and you're like, y'all didn't land it, didn't nail it. Sounds closed, doesn't sound open. And I'm not saying in a sonic sense, in an emotional sense. And then you're going to now say, well, I got this. And I know it because I'm open. And then you send it back and they're like, whoa, that's very different. And they can't connect because of fear of difference and it not working because it doesn't.
Fear of loss, familiarity loss.
Familiarity loss.
Thing, yeah.
Which is why I want to get some sort of neurologist, with our audio memory concept that we're, on to talk about this as a guest. Because it's just that, my God, I'm like, Mike Miller was over today and I was talking about how I'm so far from the fear of sending back something so different. He's just like, not me, terrified, like never works out with me. And he's kind of joking about it because I'm sure sometimes it does, but I'm at a different place in my career. So I'm coming at it with fake, not fear. Of course, I still like want it to work out, but I'm presenting it as if I have confidence, right? So I'm presenting it as if I want them to want it, right? So there's that level of assertion of, I think this is tight. Let me know what you think. I'm not saying, oh, I don't know.
Yes.
I don't know. It's like the email language you talked about a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm sending it off with, I think this is tight. I'm still wondering what y'all think. I'm still terrified of your reaction every time because it's just not going to go away because imposter syndrome is real. But I am nothing's 100% certain. I'm 98% certain that I understood what you were going for and I took it there. And that's because I feel emotionally available to all genres of music. And going back to the Love Supreme versus some top 40 mediocre, record and that disparity there. I want to attempt to make all of those.
Bridge the gap.
I want to bridge the gap, right? So it's an intentional thing. And when I ask the question of, do you think it's a one-to-one, equation there? Like, if you are open, you will bring that openness. I think it is.
Yeah.
I think personality is that deep.
Yeah. So you think it's
think so.
personality.
Yeah, I think that's personality level trait.
And as
it can be increased.
I don't really
like
understand what you're saying when you say that as a creative, but I'm meaning like what is inherent about personality?
I mean, the implications. It's so fundamental that the implications are everywhere in your life. Like it's that like deep in the structure of the brain that its implications are everywhere.
Can you describe two people who are just to sort of put a point on it?
Yeah.
Two people. Describe someone who scores lower on trade openness who makes records and someone who scores higher. Like what that might mean, how it might land in their interactions, in their work life, in the books they're reading or the relations they're having. What are the implications so that someone could, like, someone's listening and they're going, "Am I open or am I closed?"
Yeah. Let's try to bring this home.
Well, to them, I would say it's a spectrum, and so you're not either.
Yes,
you're just on a spectrum of openness. But
yes.
I would say like one indicator would be like, are you trying ideas? Are you open to ideas? Are you open to feedback? Are you, like, as in you're able to receive them and integrate them if need be? Or is there resistance, right? This door closing. And it, to Spider's point, it shows in everything, right? It shows in how you communicate. It shows in the relationships you have as a result of how you communicate and receive things. So I think it's across the board. I don't think it's like just in the profession, but I think for an example, it is like, oh, you should try this. Like, no, can't. You know what I mean? Like in their head, there's like no way of trying something. Sorry. Like the end of that spectrum might be that they're trying anything everywhere, from every
Forever.
nation and, like just every,
You've met this girl at Coachella.
Right.
To work here, some sort of voodoo melody.
Great, bro. The mix has to be done in half an hour.
Yeah.
The label
As
are
long as
waiting.
there's a trap beat underneath.
More voodoo.
Oh, actually, that's
considered
new.
voodoo.
Yeah, voodoo trap. Cool. All
There
right.
you go. That's what openness
Yeah,
gets you.
young Thug's about to come out with a voodoo trap.
So
Actually.
Rory, I have the wiki open here. And
Nice.
openness involves 6 facets or dimensions, including active imagination, which is fantasy,
I'm having a great time.
aesthetic sensitivity,
Come on.
attentiveness to inner feelings, preference for variety, and intellectual curiosity.
It's a fucking party. I love this.
No, that's what I
want to
mean.
dance.
No, that's what I mean.
Seriously, that list
Yeah.
is so fun.
Thus, openness.
Read it again. Read it again.
Wait, I was
Yeah,
so
yeah.
distracted
Oh,
by
come
your
on.
enthusiasm. I was like,
That
I've
just
never
made
seen
me-
you do that.
That made
I've
me
never
giddy
seen
high.
No,
Ever,
Rory,
ever.
See, that's transcendent, right?
Yeah, wait,
The
do it again. Do it
knowledge,
again.
The knowledge.
This is like when a goldfish jumps out of the tank. I was like, whoa.
Oh, that scene in Amelie when the goldfish commits suicide, though. That's sorry, but then they save it. Sorry, that just made me think of
Oh
that.
my God.
Okay.
Oh, boy.
Okay. So
Okay, bring it
openness involves 6 facets or dimensions, including active imagination, which is fantasy, aesthetic sensitivity, attentiveness to inner feelings, preference for variety, and intellectual curiosity. A great deal of psychometric research has demonstrated that these facets or qualities are significantly correlated. Thus, openness can be viewed as a global personality trait consisting of a set of specific traits, habits, and tendencies that cluster together. Right? Now, openness
That
tends
was only
to be
5, though. The list is only 5. I counted them the second time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah. I got 5.
facets.
Maybe is the last sentence, is that how they close it out with the 6? Is that what they...
Hold on. Active imagination, aesthetic, attentiveness, preference, and intellectual. Yeah, I guess you're right. Maybe they left one off here. Openness tends to be normally distributed with a small number of individuals scoring extremely high or extremely low on the trait, and most people scoring moderately. People who score low on openness are considered to be closed to experience. They tend to be conventional and traditional in their outlook and behavior. They prefer familiar routines to new experiences and generally have a narrower range of interests. Openness has moderate positive relationships with creativity, intelligence, and knowledge. Openness is related to the psychological trait of absorption, and like absorption, has a modest relationship to individual differences in hypnotic susceptibility.
Wow, that just threw that one in there.
Yeah. Who doesn't want a modest relationship?
Anyway, it's a whole.
No, it's helpful.
The 5-factor model is actually fascinating when you get into it, and highly predictive and highly descriptive.
That is really, I mean, that's beautiful. It's why I got so giddy is because it's so
I know.
succinct. It's so well formed.
I think we're on the upper end of the distribution.
I would hope so. I'd love to think so.
I mean,
it's interesting because I don't want to out anyone here, so I'm going to be very vague. You know how I'm speaking about Spider. Someone in my orbit who is elder and maybe not in a great place in their life. And we were talking recently at dinner, Spider and I, about what you could do to help someone in that situation, someone who's maybe closed and fearful. And I was thinking yesterday how great it would be for him to pull up his pants and paddle in the water at the ocean, like that kid. It was funny that Michael brought that up. Like how simple that would be to reconnect with something so playful and simple, you know, and just walk down the beach with your feet in the cold water, kicking sand, picking up shells, you know. And that how that seems like, I'm sure if I was to say that to this person, it would seem like just a million miles from where they're at, you know. And just kind of what a healing things something like that can be, you know.
Or you can just spike his coffee with mushrooms and just get him there.
Get him there.
You know what I mean? Like, why fuck around?
Strap in, buddy.
Again, we're not doctors, and we're not.
Yeah, I'm not recommending.
Not recommending.
Jordan Peterson was a guest on Tim Ferriss the other week, and they got to talking about this whole thing. So if you want to hear their take on it, you know, because Tim's involved in funding a lot of the research, like the Johns Hopkins group and whatever, and they got into. They had a little different conception of like. Tim was a little more bullish on everyone increasing openness, and Jordan was a little more concerned about those who would go over the edge or be more disabled by it.
I know we're coming towards the end, but in the spirit of you never know when art is going to come or not, I am. During the week, I got news from a close friend at home that a friend of ours when we were younger died of cancer, and someone I hadn't seen in probably, 12 or 14 years. We used to run a lot when we were younger. He was from out of town but lived in my hometown, was part of a sort of a big sort of collection of people around music, and really great, funny, sweet guy. When I met him, he was a juggler, street kind of like sleeping rough, and you know.
Sleeping rough?
Yeah, like sleeping, you know, in the park, like in a sleeping bag. And, you know, he was just a young dude. We were all, you know, whatever, hot mess. But anyway, it was sad to get the news that he had died, and I didn't know he'd been sick. I'd probably been told, but hadn't retained it. And for some reason, I was thinking about him a lot, and over the last couple of days, because it's just another one of those. I'm just getting these every couple of years now. It's like another friend from the same era died of an overdose a few years back, and not someone. You know, if you'd asked me to rank the 1,000 people in my life who I thought, you know, top to bottom, who'll die from an overdose, this girl was not on it. You know, so again, someone I spent a lot of time with back in the day, as part of around music, around shows, and around a community of, you know, a lot of fun. But anyway, thinking about my friend or our friend Paddy who had died, turns out he had a whole life after I knew him where he made movies and was short films, and was an advocate for cycling, and made short films about architecture, like lots of them, 50, 60 short films, was well known, had an obituary in the national newspaper for his work. But some reason immediately came into my mind this poet, Mary Howe, that I had heard on that On Being podcast years ago. I was very struck by her. Irish Catholic upbringing, East Coast, powerful speaker, great episode. I'll find it and link it in the show notes. She wrote a book of poetry called The Kingdom of Ordinary Time, which I was really struck by at the time, bought the book. And when I heard about Paddy dying, I was like, there's something in that book. The book is a lot about her brother, John, dying. And I didn't get home in time to get the book today. And I bought the book on my phone. And I was like, I know there's something there. And I read a bunch of the poems on the couch today, and there isn't something there today. There's not. I couldn't find anything that resonated. That you know, it's
Spoke
like
to the moment.
in my. And maybe I'll find it tonight over a glass of wine when I'm at home. But art, these profound moments, they don't show up on command. The bottles of wine. You know, how many times have we spent extra money on a really great bottle? You're psyched. You did the research. This is the good year, and it's like. Pretty good. Not a bad bottle of wine, but like, and then other times you get sideswiped by a bottle of wine that reminds you of your dad.
Yeah,
you know, and it's just it doesn't work on any kind of timetable. So, which is why I think I wanted to sort of close on the fact that it's so important what you said, John, and what Michael is doing, which is a kind of a practice of openness, a kind of a. For me, I'm thinking. You should think about making room for more of this in your life. And then it's like, well, after that, there's got to be some practical way to do that. What is that? You know, what does that look like? Is it a phone off for an hour? Is it like between 11 and midnight?
Is it in the calendar?
Yeah.
I'm only open from 9 p.m. to 10 p.m.
Yeah, and well,
Yeah.
in that case, you're open for an hour
Well,
more than
I
most
know.
people.
We know we don't want screens between 10 and 4 a.m. So that's not going to be the time.
Yes. Yeah.
Unless you got an old iPod,
I've got
you
I've
know,
got
with
8
no
p.m.
blue light.
8 p.m. till 10, I guess.
Yeah, there you go.
That's my slot.
A hand cranked iPod. Wind it up.
Yeah.
No,
I thanks for that. It's like,
does we're sort of looking to wrap up, John, for
I told them to text when they're heading over, and I haven't gotten a response yet.
okay.
I'd imagine that they're going to be like a 9:30, meaning in 7 to 10 minutes.
Does so I have a
Meaning-
small pivot if anyone
Yeah,
it may or may not.
let's go.
So on the way down today, I was listening to a podcast with Tyler Cowen, who's an economist and professor at the Mercatus Institute, I think. And really interesting dude. I found him on either Lex or Eric Weinstein months ago and went down the rabbit hole for 6 months and listened to a bunch of his podcasts. And I subscribe to his newsletter, which is really intense, but I click on something almost every day on it. And he interviewed, I went back and found his very first interview, which is with Peter Thiel, who is how would you describe Peter Thiel, Spider? He is the entrepreneur,
Finance dude. Started PayPal.
Co-founder of PayPal,
What's that,
co-founder
Graham?
of venture capitalist,
Yeah.
Palantir, Founders Fund, notable sort of
Thinker.
and not he's not a contrarian, but he is a certainly
He's a kind of controversial figure.
controversial figure.
Yeah.
Anyway, great conversation. But what struck me on the way down, and I rewound it and captured the note. At some point, someone asked him the question. It was actually a question because it's the very first interview that Tyler Cowen had done on stage at this institute, this sort of emergent thing they were building. He was like, you know business, you know startups, you know new things. What should we do? How should we be better? And this was his answer, which I loved, for us, and hopefully maybe for some of the listeners. So he said, it's always a mistake to be too focused on prestige and status. I'm always long on substance and short on status. So the idea that in the short term you'll get, and he said, how did he phrase it? Respectability comes at a price. It softens the edges and it makes you modulate what you say. So the idea of sort of claiming your
Right. If the currency is status, then you will capitulate. Yeah.
to
and if
get
it's substance, you're playing a different game.
Yeah, you're playing. Yeah, exactly. So are you writing the song for you, or are you writing it for what you think people want to hear?
He's pretty good
You
with
know.
incentive structures, this Peter Thiel.
Oh yeah, for real.
Yeah.
I took a hike with an engineer this last week, and we had a long riff on claiming what you referenced earlier, claiming the first pass as your own. That fear and how it's hard to do, and just that like first pass is mine. After that, whatever you guys want. If I completely miss the mark, we do a whole new take. If it's iterations, whatever. But so that relates to this,
Yeah.
and just in every venture in this, we've had the conversation where I'm like, what should we do to get more streams? And everyone's like, meh. Stop thinking about it. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep doing what we're doing. You know what I mean? Which is the right answer. It's what I needed to hear that day, So I loved it. Always a mistake to be too focused on prestige and status. I'm always long on substance, short on status.
Hey, it's a good place to
Yeah,
wrap it up.
I'm down. Michael, you got anything?
Nope.
This was great, dudes.
Cue the Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Season 11? Let's go.
Oh, I can't wait.
Can't wait.
Conversations is produced and mixed by Dylan Seals. The Conversations theme was performed and recorded by the Hazelrick Brothers.